Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and on Tuesdays we have these Stroke Buddies Recovery and Science support group meetings. And today we're lucky to have Dr. Bruce Hetzler back again for, I think, the 8th or 9th time. Thank you for all the presentations you've done. This one today is not exactly on stroke, but I thought it was intriguing because it involves the brain and the way the brain works. And as most of you know, Dr. Hetzler is not only a stroke survivor, but a PhD neuroscientist and a magician. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and then he's going to do a little presentation, and we'll have a little discussion about all this. So, Dr. Hetzler?
Well, thank you, Ralph. And before we get into the presentation, I'd like to set the stage by doing a little something with you. I'm going to ask you to do something rather difficult now.
Uh-oh.
I would like you to make your mind a total blank.
That is difficult. Okay.
And when you do that, one of these, blank as well. Now, I'm going to move the screen down so hopefully you can see that. See, every time I do this trick, I lose a card. Not sure how many I've got left. Can you see those? I'm going to try to count. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, Ralph, what I would like for you to do, I'm trying to spread them out here. There. Can you see the 6 cards, Ralph?
Yeah, hold them a little bit to your left. There you go. Okay, now I can see them perfectly.
I would like you to think of one of them.
Think of one of them. Okay.
Don't tell me what it is, just think of it.
Oh, no, I won't tell you what it is.
Are you thinking of one of them?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Then, Ralph, what I would like for you to do is say it over and over and over in your mind. Okay? Because when you do that, you will wear it out. And when that happens, it will start to go blank. So, do you see one that is starting to go blank?
Got to flip them around.
No, on the back, you see.
Oh, on the back. Oh, yeah, I see one that's going blank.
Okay. We'll just say the card over in your mind one more time.
Okay.
And let's see. Again, I'm trying to hold these up here. There's one up here to the going blank. Ralph?
Okay. Yeah, one of them's blank.
Do you see your card here?
No, I do not.
Well then, Ralph, one card has gone completely blank. And tell me, what card were you thinking of?
8 of hearts.
And you did not see that there. Well, son of a gun. It looks like I've lost another card. So now I can only do this trick 1,
Only 5 more times.
3, 4, 5 times. Boy, so in the future, Ralph, be careful with what you think of. So that is our introduction. And I'm going to tilt the screen back up now.
All right.
And I'm going to set this up to share the screen. There we go. Okay, the talk today is about magic, mentalism, and the mind. This is going to be an interactive presentation. I'm going to ask you to do things like count things or make some mental calculations or answer questions, and you get much more out of it if you participate. All right? Okay. So, magic is one of the oldest forms of entertainment. Using completely natural means, magicians create magic tricks that seem to be outside the laws of nature. In so doing, they entertain an audience. Now, to do so, magicians manipulate human attention and cognition using techniques that most effectively divert attention or exploit the shortcomings of human vision and awareness. That is, what you see, feel, hear, and think is based on what you expect to see, hear, feel, and think. Magicians are adept at using your mind's intrinsic properties against you. Now, it turns out sometimes things are not always what they seem to be. In the next slide, I'm going to show you a paragraph. I would like you to take about 10 to 15 seconds to read the paragraph, and as you do, count the number of F's in it. There will be F's in some of the words. I want you to count the number of F's and remember that number. Okay? Now I'm going to show you a paragraph. I'm going to spell my name. That'll take about 10 to 15 seconds. And during that time, I want you to count the number of F's. Brucetzer. Okay, now hopefully you've got the number of F's. Now, how many F's did you find? How many of you found 3? Okay, how many found 4? One person found 4? Okay. How many found 5? Oh, Ralph found 5. How many found 6? Well, how many are there really?
6, I think.
If you found 3, you're normal. If you found 4, you're outstanding. If you found 5, you're very exceptional. If you found 6, you're a genius.
I found it very distracting for you to be spelling your name while I was trying to pay attention and think.
That was the point.
I know. It worked.
There are, in fact, 6 F's, but 3 of the F's are invisible, even though they are in full view. And that's because our minds lead us to search the longer, more important words. The F's in the short 2-letter words, they were OF, are not processed typically during our search. So the F's that were in the word of were very difficult to find. What is the most famous trick in all of magic? Can anyone tell me?
Cutting somebody in half?
Exactly.
Rabbit out of the hat?
Sawing a woman in half.
All right.
I used to do that, but I stopped doing it after the accident.
Oh.
But it's okay. She's living comfortably in New York and Boston. Okay. Okay, the sawing a woman in half illusion is based on 2 things: a hollowed out box and your brain's desire for good continuation. When the woman lies down in the box, you see her head at one end and her feet at the other. Your brain tells you that she is supine and in one piece, but actually, she's not lying down flat. The box is constructed so that the head at one end and the feet at the other end belong to 2 different women. This is illustrated here. In A, at the top, you see the woman lie in the box with what seems to be her head at one end and feet at the other. You assume that she's in the box as shown in B. That is the full body in there, head at one end, feet at the other. But what's really happening is shown in C. She's curled up at the top end, while some other feet are at the bottom end. Have you ever heard the expression, the hand is quicker than the eye? How
Definitely.
do you think that is true? You think that is true? How many think it is false? Ralph,
But I may know something.
this statement is false. The human eye is very efficient and capable of spotting flashes of light as brief as 10 milliseconds. That's 10,000th of a second. Magicians cannot outrun the audience's eyes. But the hand is quicker than the mind. It is the mind and not the eyeball that is at fault. It's a failure to notice. And this is called inattentional blindness. How is this accomplished? By misdirection. It's misdirection, not speed, that is the key to most magic tricks. Misdirection is used to control a person's attention as well as where a person is looking. You have a spotlight of attention, and that's a limited capacity for attention. And you actively ignore virtually everything else around the spotlight. The magician manipulates your attention rather than your gaze. Misdirection forces the audience into multitasking. Multitasking is the ability to do several things at the same time efficiently and well. But multitasking is a myth. Your brain is configured to respond to one thing at a time. That's the way your brain works. So to do your best, you must do one thing at a time. Now, there's several types of misdirection. One is called passive misdirection. This is also called sensory capture. When a new, flashy, or moving object diverts your attention. One way that a magician might induce sensory capture is by suddenly producing a flying dove. The spectator's gaze and focus will focus on the dove's flight. This will give the magician a few unattended moments in which he or she can conduct a secret maneuver. Another facet of sensory capture that magicians exploit is the fact that if more than one movement is visible, spectators will follow the larger, more salient motion. This is why magicians say a big move covers a small move. Then there's active misdirection. The salience of an object can be enhanced by actively directing attention to it. For example, a magician might draw attention to something by asking a member of the audience to examine it. That will draw their attention to that. And then there's time misdirection. And this is when the audience looks at something. This is used to separate the moment of the method from the moment of the effect. And this prevents the spectator from causally linking the method and the effect. Also, your brain has what are called mirror neurons. These neurons link action and perception. These were discovered in a laboratory in Italy in the 1990s. The researchers were recording from individual neurons in a monkey's brain, and they found a neuron that became active when the monkey picked up a raisin to eat it. Whenever the monkey picked up the raisin, those neurons become active. And then came the surprise. A researcher in the laboratory picked up a raisin, and those same neurons became active. And it turns out that these so-called mirror neurons help you understand the actions and intentions of other people. They tell you what that person is planning to do or doing. Mirror neurons in the brains of the audience help a magician disguise one action as another. It looks like he or she is doing something, but they're really doing something else. And that's the basis of sleight of hand. So when you see a magician doing something that appears to be normal, your mirror neurons tell you what the magician is doing, but this may be wrong. Comedy and laughter. Comedy and laughter put your attentional spotlight on hold. That is, the magician can do virtually anything while the audience is laughing and nobody will notice. That's why I often tell jokes while I'm performing. For example, I might tell the audience, I recently had the pleasure of performing this trick over the radio. And you believe it, 200 people called in and said they couldn't see how it was done. And while they are laughing, I can do something then. So magicians use humor to lower your guard. Then there is change blindness. People often fail to notice something that's different from the way it was before.
Not me.
This requires the observer to compare the post-change state with the pre-change state. Such a failure to notice changes in consecutive scenes is fundamental to some magic tricks. Now I'm going to show you a video. Pay careful attention. Here it comes.
Hi, I'm Richard, this is Sarah, and we're going to perform the amazing colour-changing card trick with this blue-backed deck of cards. Now, the idea is very simple. I'm just going to spread the cards in front of Sarah and ask her to push any card towards the camera.
Right, okay, let's see. I'm going to go for this card here.
Okay. Now, Sarah could have selected any card at all from the deck, but she selected the card which is now face down on the table. And what I'm going to ask her to do is show us which card she selected.
Right, so the card that I chose was in fact the 3 of diamonds.
The 3 of diamonds, okay, excellent choice. That card goes back into the deck. Now I'm just going to spread the cards face up on the table, give a little click of the fingers, and you'll see that Sarah's card here has now got a blue back. Not particularly surprising. What's slightly more surprising is all of the other cards have got red backs. And that is the amazing colour-changing card trick.
Read the screen. This is not about the color changing cards. There are 4 other color changes that are going to show up here. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
None. I was looking at the card.
Richard, this is Sarah, and we're going to perform the amazing colour-changing card trick with this blue-backed deck of cards. Now, the idea is very simple. I'm just going to spread the cards in front of Sarah and ask her to push any card towards the camera.
Right, okay, let's see. I'm going to go for this card here.
Okay. Now, Sarah could have selected any card at all from the deck, but she selected the card which is now face down on the table. And what I'm going to ask her to do is show us which card she selected.
Right, so the card that I chose was in fact the 3 of diamonds.
The 3 of diamonds, okay, excellent choice. That card goes back into the deck. Now I'm just going to spread the cards face up on the table, give a little click of the fingers, and you'll see that Sarah's card here has now got a blue back. Not particularly surprising. What's slightly more surprising is all of the other cards have got red backs. And that is the amazing color changing card trick.
And so you missed all those other color changes.
I did. Because I was staring intently at the color of the cards.
Very good. There's also inattentional blindness. People fail to notice an unexpected object that is fully visible. In this case, no memory comparison is needed. Thus, inattentional blindness differs from change blindness in that no memory comparison is needed. I will show you another video.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
How many passes did you count?
10.
The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Did you see the gorilla? Let's watch again. See the gorilla now?
I do now.
This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted.
Mind-boggling.
Available for use in talks, training, and teaching on DVDs from VisCog Productions.
Okay, here's something else. Magic relies heavily on the element of surprise, and magicians try to never repeat a trick for the same audience. However, sometimes a magician will repeat a trick or part of a trick in order to prime an audience. What is priming? Answer the following questions out loud quickly. Do not stop to think about your answer. What is the color of snow?
White.
What color are clouds?
White.
What color is whipped cream?
White.
What color are polar bears?
Off-white.
What do cows drink?
Milk.
If you said milk, you were primed. Cows drink water.
You're right.
You were primed to think of something white.
Interesting.
Let's try an experiment. I'd like you all to do the following silently. Think of a small number, double the number, add 8 to the result. Divide the result by 2. Subtract the original number. You done that?
Yes.
Now convert this number to a letter of the alphabet. So if you've got 1, that will equal A, 2 will equal B, and so on. Now think of the name of a country that starts with this letter. Now think of an animal whose name starts with the next letter. Now think of the color of that animal. You have it? I will try to read your mind. Oh, wait. Your collective image must be wrong. There must be a problem. There are no gray elephants in Denmark.
Pretty close. I was thinking white still, so I said ermine.
Could have come up with gray elephants in Denmark. That was a brief example of mentalism. Mentalism is a branch of magic that includes things that are apparently extrasensory, things like telepathy, revealing information unknown to the mentalists, clairvoyance, perceiving something in the future, or psychokinesis, moving an object with the mind. Oxytocin is also involved in magic. Oxytocin is a hormone secreted by the posterior pituitary gland. It's released during childbirth, nursing, social recognition, and cooperation. It makes acts of cooperation feel really good. Magicians and mentalists are very friendly, like me, and very innocent in manner, and talk about the need for help. This induces oxytocin release in your body. In summary, magic is not about secrets, tricks, or methods. The magician hijacks your brain's attentional mechanisms. Magic happens not in the hands of the magician, but the mind of the spectator. So the greatest magic show on earth is the one that happens inside your brain. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. That was interesting.
Well, thank you.
So obviously the way that whole math thing worked, you ended up with 4 no matter what you did. No matter what number you picked.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But if you're still thinking white, you could pick an ermine instead of an elephant. Anyway, so we see some really complex magic tricks like David Blaine does and stuff like that. We make airplanes disappear in the sky, and I have no idea how they do those kind of really complex things.
Well, they seem complex, but most of them are basically fairly easy to do in principle.
Okay. Well, they must have know some things I don't know.
Well, that's the whole point, yes.
I'm always baffled. One of my favorite shows, I don't know if you ever saw it, Dr. Hetzler, was Nat Geo had a show called Brain Games. And
I saw a little bit of it, yes.
they probably made about, I don't know, well, I guess with television, they probably made 13 episodes. I was gonna say there were probably 10 or 15 episodes. They used to repeat them. I'd watch them over again. They had I guess he was a reformed pickpocket and card magician, sleight of hand expert in Las Vegas, and they'd bring him on, and he would do all kinds of things, and then they would show you exactly how he did it. And most of the time, he was distracting. He had a scarf or something. He was distracting you with a scarf or in some other way. I mean, I can't believe it. Nobody. I've seen the gorilla thing before, not with basketballs. I can't believe that your brain locks out the gorilla.
Yeah, you'd think that would be obvious, but you're asked to pay attention to something else.
Right. Well, I thought I saw some of the gray uniforms turning to white because I was like, well, and there were about 6 of them. So, and there were more than one basketball. So, you're really, really distracted by that. And it's hard to believe when you see it in replay that the gorilla actually walked through that slow and went like that. I mean, if he'd scooted through, that'd been one thing, but he just was meandering and he stopped in the middle and put his hands up and I didn't even see it.
And that's the way it's supposed to be.
One of the things they did on Brain Games was on multitasking. They got this, I think it was from a Slavic country, so let's say Czechoslovakia. Well, Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore, and neither is Yugoslavia. Anyway, he was from Eastern Europe, and he claimed to be the world's best multitasker. Well, old Nat Geo stuck him in a car on a twisty, windy infield track at a racetrack in the snow, and he put him on the telephone, and they were saying all kinds of complex things to him, and they threw 6-foot beach balls at him at the car. So he was having to drive in the snow on this twisty course, avoid the beach balls, and keep the car on the road while people were talking to him, and he drove right off the road just one time after another. They were talking about multitasking and
Sure.
the brain's ability to only basically the way the brain works to process only one thing. It's interesting because I got into a discussion about this. They kind of misused the word multitasking. I think multiple tasking would have been better. They were talking about juggling all the different things like in the kitchen or something like where you got something on the back burner that's got 3 minutes left and you're stirring something else. And that's not, I mean, I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. So if you're doing something like cooking where you're doing 3 or 4 tasks, you're still not really multitasking in that.
Well, that's why you need a timer, because you're going to forget what time it is. Right.
I use mine all the time, for stirring oatmeal, all kinds of things. Yeah, don't forget about this, don't forget about that. Yeah, so they were talking about like what I would call multiple tasking or getting overwhelmed after a stroke, not being able to deal with
Sure.
multiple things like that. It wasn't real multitasking. Of course, it was in a group, and whenever you're in a group discussion, somebody is the expert, whether they are or not.
Right.
And so I just actually I quoted you and backed out of the whole thing. I couldn't find the I did a quick search of the transcripts and didn't see anything. So I was thinking it wasn't in one of your presentations. It was more in another discussion we had someplace else. And I said, this is crazy. You're not here to argue,
Right.
So I just stayed backed out of it. Oh, Tara joined us. Hey, Tara. I don't know who M Guard is, but welcome. And John popped in and popped out and came back. John, what did you get the exact same thing on? Maybe he's not there. He put something in the chat. I was trying to keep the conversation going. Where'd it go?
That's okay.
Oh, yeah, exactly what I had. But he could be driving or something, so we won't bother him. So, anybody got any questions for the good doctor, either on magic or neuroscience? Martha, did you understand everything in that book? Nobody's here. They're just listening, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I'd be interested what Martha thinks of the book.
One of the what?
Wonder how much Martha likes the book.
She said she liked it. She was hoping for the chapter. She said she was looking forward to the chapter. I made a bad joke in the email between us about how you said there'll only be half of the trillion neurons will be on the test, and she said she was looking forward to the chapter that named half of the neurons.
Oh yeah, there are 100 million of them.
100 million neurons?
100 million, yes. And I would tell my students I'll only expect to know half of them by name.
Right. And I made a bad joke about, don't worry, if he recommends the book, there are only half the neurons on the test. So there are only 100 million? It seems
Yes,
like
100 million.
seems like there'd be more than that. We have got, but
No,
neurons are a specialty cell,
what do
right?
you mean?
Your brain's not 100% neurons.
No, you've got neurons and you've got what are called glial cells, Glial. And there are three types. There are astrocytes. Astrocytes are named after the Jetsons dog, Astro.
Really?
No.
Okay. I'm I'm gullible. I make a good audience for a magician or somebody that tells bad dad jokes, of which you are both. Anyway, Yes,
Astrocytes are star-shaped so that they get,
oh, okay. That would make sense.
and then they're oligodendrocytes,
Okay,
and the oligodendrocytes form the myelin.
right.
Now, when I talk about a neuron, remember the neuron's got a cell body, and extended from the cell body are dendrites, and there's typically one long axon. But the axon has a covering around it. It's in segments. It's like you can imagine a 10-foot long hot dog with different hot dog buns lined up all along it.
Okay.
And the covering is called myelin. And the myelin is formed by the oligodendrocytes. The oligodendrocyte is sort of, just looking at my phone, sorry. The oligodendrocyte you can think of as sort of like an octopus, an eight-armed octopus,
Mm-hmm.
where each arm of the octopus reaches out and wraps around one portion of an axon. So a single octopus can form one myelin segment around 8 different axons.
Cool. So is that how connections are made?
No,
No.
no.
Why would they do that then?
The myelin speeds up the rate at which a message goes down the axon.
Okay.
Now, I won't go into it further than that, it's a little complicated. But there are some diseases that just attack the myelin. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease that attacks the myelin, not the neurons. But if you destroy the myelin around an axon, that neuron for which that axon is associated is no longer signaling at the appropriate time to other neurons, so it messes things up.
Um, was that all 3 types of glial cells?
Oh, and then there are microglia.
Okay.
Those are the small glial cells, and they are part of the immune system in the brain. So you have astrocytes, and they sort of form a matrix to hold the brain together. And then there are oligodendrocytes that form the myelin and the microglia that are part of the immune system.
Now, I read somewhere, I believe I got this right, that the glial cells are responsible for washing or cleaning the brain at night. Is that true?
Sort of.
Okay.
During, you've got several stages of sleep. You've got 4 stages. And stages 3 and 4 have a lot of delta waves, and they're what are called slow wave sleep. And during slow wave sleep, channels between the astrocytes expand. So they're wider channels, and more cerebrospinal fluid goes through them, like more water through a canal. And
Okay.
that washes the debris out of there. Um, and it washes out stuff like things that contribute to Alzheimer's disease. The amyloid protein
Right.
gets washed out during stages 3 and 4 of sleep because, again, these astrocyte channels open up and washes the amyloid protein and the tau protein. The tau protein is inside a neuron, amyloid beta protein is outside. Both of them contribute to Alzheimer's disease. And it turns out
It would be important to get stage 3 and 4 sleep then.
it is every night you should. Yes, it'll help you. And it turns out that people with a genetic history of Alzheimer's disease have poorer stages 3 and 4 of sleep and increased levels of amyloid beta protein and tau protein in their cerebrospinal fluid.
I wonder if that's the causes. I'm sure you're probably familiar with, there's a family in Colombia, South America, and they've been studying them for about 40 years. They have they're genetically predisposed to get Alzheimer's, and almost all of them do. I wonder if it's a sleep deficiency.
I can't answer that. But that would certainly have something to do with it, certainly contribute.
Have you ever seen any of the reports on that family?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's kind of interesting because I guess it's sort of like a study. It's a kind of closed group, if you will, because they're all related and they have an astronomical percentage of them get Alzheimer's. It's like, if you're born in that family, it's surprised I haven't stopped having kids, but if you're born in that family, you're pretty much gonna get it. So they've been studying them for a long time.
I understand it's a longitudinal study that studies multiple generations.
Right. So the glial cells actually open up so more of the fluid can wash through.
Well, channels between glial cells open up.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I meant. They expand the space.
Right.
Because there's another type of kind of like I don't know if cleaning is the right word, but doesn't your brain during sleep also, I remember this from your sleep presentation, I believe, doesn't your brain also decide during certain types of sleep what it's going to pack away into long-term memory and what it's going to throw away from the day?
Well, yes, storage occurs during stages of sleep. Yes.
I wonder how it knows what to save. Maybe the more important it is to you, more repetitions or whatever.
Well, the more you repeat something, the more likely you are to remember it. Yes.
I would assume that would also be true that the whole thing in stroke recovery with doing lots of reps of something.
Yes.
I would assume
Yes.
that the purpose of that is to have those memories, they say muscle memory, but it's really brain memory.
Well, motor memory.
I guess.
Yeah.
To have those repetitions, if you do a lot of repetitions, they're maybe more likely to survive that the long-term, short-term cleaning out process.
Yes. Yeah, repetition is very important, not only for remembering verbal things, but motor memory as well.
Well, and the other thing I used to do, well, I still do videos, but I used to do a lot of training videos and the what is ASTG, American Society for Training and Development. What are they called? Instructional designers. It's been a few years since I've been working in that arena. But they'll always tell you that you remember only a certain amount of what you hear. You remember a lot more if you see it and hear it. You learn even more if you're involved in some way. The more senses and the more involvement you have, the more likely you are to remember something. Maybe
Well, it's true because you have more pathways to gain that information.
Okay.
More you can associate with it, the more likely you are to retrieve it.
Right. So in a sense, more neurons have been connected when you're.
Well, yes, yeah. So it would be connected with stuff in your auditory cortex, your visual cortex, somatosensory cortex. Yeah. And each of those connections provides a retrieval route for accessing it. Like if you encounter a smell, let's say you haven't smelled in 20 years, a memory might pop up because the olfactory part of your brain gets to that memory.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I was working with with a physical therapist, a retired physical therapist friend of mine with some local stroke survivors. And we had one gal that was, she couldn't hardly do anything. She couldn't sit up. She couldn't hold her head straight. She couldn't dress. She couldn't get on the floor. She couldn't even roll. We had to teach her how to roll with her head and hips. One of the things that he was big on was the cranial nerves. And we always started the sessions with cinnamon extract or some really strong olfactory thing, just pass it under her nose, and um, that's cranial nerve number one, as I recall.
Yes, that's correct.
I
There's
tried,
an electronic device to remember them. There are 12 cranial nerves,
right.
and you can remember the first letter of each cranial nerve if you can remember this little saying.
Uh-oh. I'm gonna write it down this time. Go ahead.
On old Olympus, towering top, a fair armed girl vends snowy hops. On old Olympus, towering top, a fair armed girl vends snowy hops. If you can remember the first letter of each of those words, that will help you remember the names of the cranial nerves. So on old Olympus, it's olfactory, optic, oculomotor. Towering top, trochlear, trigeminal. A fair, abducens, facial. Armed girl, auditory vestibular, glossopharyngeal. Vens, vagus. Snowy, spinal accessory. Hops, hypoglossal.
Okay.
And Martha, you're going to have to remember those 12 for the test.
I was just gonna say, Martha, those will be on the test.
Yes.
I didn't get that acronym. I just remember that 2 and 3 are have to do with the eyes, and then it skips a couple, and I think 5 and 6 also have to do with the eyes.
No, 6 does. That's the abducens.
So, yeah,
Yeah, abducens controls the lateral rectus muscle in the eye.
right. Well, we used to go through, and one of the things that we were trying to do was, and I know you're not a physical therapist, and I'm not quite exactly sure how or why we were doing it and how it played into recovery, but we used to go through all of them, and we would do things with auditorily, and also the whole thing with the finger in, out, left, right, up, down, and crosswise. That gets about 3 or 4 of the ones that deal with the eyes.
Yep.
And I guess we're just trying to stimulate all the cranial nerves for some reason. I don't.
Useful that, yeah.
It's funny because he taught me that in about 45 minutes, and I went through all 12 of them, went through the routine I was to do, and I wrote down notes, and I kind of memorized the routine between my notes and doing it once. I'm somebody who, if I do it, I can learn it. So he had me do it. I told him that, and if he had me do it rather and explain it to me. And when we got done, he said, "You got that?" I looked at my yellow sheet, because I'm constantly writing on my yellow pad and then doing it and back and forth. He said, "You got all that?" I said, "I think so." He said, "Good, because that was an entire graduate semester of college in 45 minutes." So I went, "Okay, no wonder that was that was a lot to ask." But I did learn the routine, and I did it with her for quite a while until we got her. Well, we taught her how to roll. We taught her how to get up and down out of the wheelchair eventually. Taught her how to crawl. Poor thing had to crawl for about a year and a half to go from a 4-point crawl to a 2-point crawl. Um, brain patterning, I guess, is what we were doing. All right. Well,
Well, you know, I had a right hemisphere stroke, and a right hemisphere stroke is supposed to make it difficult for someone to dress themselves in the morning. And my wife was impressed that I can dress myself in the morning. But then she was impressed that I could dress myself in the morning before my stroke.
oh, okay. So I know that well I've heard I had some neurological nurses tell me that balance is more difficult. Of course, balance is the most difficult after stroke,
Cerebellum stroke?
back of the head, cerebellum,
Yeah.
particularly. The woman I was talking about had two strokes to her cerebellum, brain stem, all those things in the back that put things together cause it. But I was told a couple of things I remember about right strokes. I also had a right hemorrhagic stroke
Yeah.
to my thalamus a year or so before yours. So we share the same type of stroke. You told me once if mine had been a couple millimeters one way or the other, I'd probably be blind, which was terrifying, but I see okay. So,
Well, in fact, I explained to you why that was in an earlier presentation.
yeah,
Thalamus has got 8 separate nuclei, each involved in something else. And one of those nuclei is involved in vision. Remember the name of it?
no, it was a really complex name. I'll write it down this time. I try and learn this stuff.
The lateral geniculate nucleus.
Okay.
And that's the portion of the thalamus that's involved in vision. And if that had been damaged, you would be blind in your left visual field.
Interesting, because I have trouble with my left eye. So maybe it was slightly damaged or something.
Now, if you say your left eye, that again is cranial nerves. So that's different from the thalamus. Thalamus does not control movement of the eyes.
Well, I don't have trouble moving it. I have trouble, it's weaker. It's it's not the same since my stroke. Um, anyway, Martha wants to know if that's going to be on the test.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. My brother taught college calculus for about 13 years, and his whole thing was all these students, they don't care about learning. They just want to know well, not all the students, because he had a couple. He has one that he's still in touch with 10 years later. He had some prize students, but the most asked question in class, and maybe you can confirm or deny this, was, will that be on the test, Professor?
Well, that is one of the most asked questions, sure.
It's like they only want to study what's going to be on the test.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that kind of indicates it's more important to get a passing grade than to learn.
Well,
I
it's
would,
become more and more that way. Of course, I'm retired now, but at first it seems they were just trying to remember everything. But later, actually, uh, the more years I taught, um, I would give them a handout a couple of days before the exam that listed pages in the text chapters that would not be covered on the exam.
ah,
So they wouldn't be responsible for material on pages, I don't know, 8 to 10 and 12 to 15 or whatever. So try to make it a little easier for them. Now, Martha, you're responsible for everything.
We're gonna hold her to a higher standard.
Right.
Well, this was fun. I appreciate you indulging me with all my questions and stuff. Maybe I ought to get that book and read it.
It's a good book. I used many editions of it over the years that I taught there. He writes very well, and it's up to date. You'll learn about the brain by reading that book.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I still have the email, of course, so maybe I should get it.
Okay. Then do it.
I was worried that be like over my head.
He starts out slowly, it builds up over the chapters. You have to start with the early chapters on the basic structure of the brain and structure of the neuron. It gets more and more complicated as the chapters go on.
Yeah, well, I mean, you generally don't read a textbook from the middle on. Bad idea, you know. Most buildings have a foundation,
Right.
so you don't start building floor number 7 in outer space. I mean, because, people needs to be supported by something else, which would be the knowledge base you got in the earlier chapters. So I'll check in with Martha on that and see what I think.
Okay.
I thought about taking classes locally. Not interested particularly in a degree, but in learning. I thought about taking classes in neuroscience and also in anatomy and basic PT. Those would be
Sure.
those would be 3 things that'd be really useful in what I do with helping stroke survivors. Because I always preach, when you had a stroke, you're not in a very good place because you've got brain damage, you're laying in a hospital bed, you can't move one side, and you got to become your own best patient advocate. You got to learn everything you can about the brain. You got to learn everything you can about stroke. You got to find out where your stroke was and the implications of that. It's a lot to get dumped on you, and after you've had your life turned upside down like this empty water glass. So,
Right.
but the more you know about, I think it's important, the more you know about how the brain works, the more focused approach you can take towards
Yes.
recovery.
Yes.
I dropped your presentation on neuroplasticity 3 or 4 times a week in the groups when people they come back and go, I went to therapy today and I'm at 6 months and they're releasing me. And they said, this is all I'm going to get. What do you guys think? Well, we all know that's not true. So you and I are leading the number of views. I've got one on the basics about how to learn everything about the brain, become your own patient advocate. It's called What Happened, What Happened, What to Do About It After a Stroke. It's for newbies. And yours on neuroplasticity. They're both headed towards 2,000 views. So apparently we've done a little bit of good spreading some knowledge. The reason I have these meetings, I think, knowledge is power. Of course, I'm talking to a PhD university professor who probably believes very strongly that knowledge is power.
Yes.
So this one wasn't exactly on stroke, but it was fascinating. And
Glad you liked it.
I'm sure there are going to be a bunch of people that do not see the gorilla.
I'm sure you are correct.
Well, with that, I guess we'll thank you. And
Wait, I have a question.
okay, of course you do.
At what age does dementia start?
I can't give you an exact answer for that because there's early onset dementia versus sort of normal onset. And I'm not a neurologist, but I think early onset dementia would be around age 40, whereas the more traditional would be age 60 and older, 60 to 70. Also, there are several different types of dementia. The type that most people are aware of and the most common is Alzheimer's disease. But there's also a type of dementia called frontal temporal dementia involving the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. And there's a third type called Lewy body dementia. I think Ted Turner has that, or had, I don't know if he's dead yet.
Nope.
I think he's got Lewy body dementia. So there are 3 types that I'm aware of. There might be more types. But
where does vascular or high blood pressure dementia come in? The frontal lobe or all?
I don't know.
I'll look it up and tell you.
Okay, that would be
Well,
fine.
we've been training. We have a AI bot. They call it Ralph bot, and apparently it's going to stick because it's apparently catchy and easy to remember and stuff. Anyway, I wanted to change it, but I listened to marketing people. And yeah, we fed it all your presentations. We fed it all every Tuesday talk I've ever done. A couple hundred papers, a couple hundred videos. And it gives pretty good answers. Like you were always saying when we got to the sugar discussion, you were saying, but your brain runs on glucose. So I actually asked it. I think I might have sent it to you, but I'll tell everybody else out there that I asked it. So there isn't any naturally occurring glucose that I could find, like apples don't have glucose in them. So they got fructose. So I asked our AI that question, and I said, what's the best source of glucose for your brain since it doesn't occur naturally in anything? And it told me that complex carbohydrates are the best because they don't spike your blood sugar and they supply a constant source of glucose to your brain. And so much for all those keto and carb diets, which some people think are good for you. I take a balanced approach to diet, like I try and take a balanced approach to life. Don't go too far down any
Right.
one road.
I hear you. Yes.
Seems to work for me.
Mhm.
Or I better not get out my soapbox here.
Okay.
Oh, it's just so I'll look that up because that interests me.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
Ralph, I think I'm gonna check off now. I've got an appointment this afternoon.
Yep,
So
I was just thanking you anyway. So thank you, and we
my pleasure.
we appreciate it.
Okay. And
Thank you.
you're welcome. Be careful with your gorilla suit.
Okay.
Yep.
Do all you can with what you have, in the time you have, in the place you are. Do all you can. Do all you can.